Hey chess friends, National Master James Canty III here with Chess.com, and today we have the top 5 Hikaru Nakamura King's Indian defenses. Very strong opening, and he's a monster with it, so let's get right into it. This is the first one actually. It's going to be Anatoly Karpov versus Hikaru Nakamura back in 2008. So let's see what happened. In this position, this was a same-ish. This became a same-ish King's Indian defense. That's an early F3 actually in the opening, and we reached this position on move 22. Now after rook to D1 from Anatoly Karpov, well, you have to do attacking chess. King's Indian is about attacking as much as you can, dynamicism, and fighting for a win. And after rook to D1, there's knight to G4, not only opening up our bishop here, protecting the E5 pawn, attacking H2, and knight E3 is very annoying. What a strong move. And then after knight G4, well, Karpov chooses bishop E2, and he says, okay, if you're going to take this knight over here, well, first off, your rook's hanging, but actually this knight is definitely trapped, and it can't get out. So now we choose rook takes D1 from Naka here, and then after bishop takes D1, knight takes H2, again, just runs into the knight almost being trapped. Now, of course, knight F1 is a way out of here, and, you know, white could probably hold this game, but he didn't choose this. Instead, he actually does rook takes D1, and after bishop takes D1, when you find a good move, you look for a better one, and Hikaru finds knight to E3, not only attacking the bishop, but attacking G2 and C4 all at the same time. What a knight, right? So knight E3, very, very strong. And then bishop to E2 from Karpov here, defending the pawn closest to the king, even though he can take on G2, which is exactly what Hikaru does, is taking now on G2. And then F takes E5 and bishop takes E5, where black is now up a pawn here in an endgame. H2 is hanging. Maybe we can queen later if we're able to capture this. But white needs some serious counterplay. The pieces aren't the greatest. This bishop's hitting air in a way. This bishop's only defending, and his knight is on the rim, which makes it very dim. So it's a very, very hard game here for Karpov. After bishop takes E4, he still plays on and says, okay, you know what? We need to get some more pawns off the board. So after bishop G4, we're going to take on E6 with a check here, and hopefully we can hold a draw here, or maybe even more, because we do have 2 bishops as well, but we definitely need to play on. After bishop G4, you would think bishop takes H2, and you can just take mine with check as well, but actually there's a better move, and there's a move that Hikaru chose in this game. What actually would you play in this position? Here it is, guys. Instead of bishop takes H2, Hikaru says bishop takes C4 for the score. Karpov missed this one here. And after king takes C4, well, the intention is very clear. Knight E3. Wow, this knight was doing a lot of work today. And knight E3 checking the king and attacking the bishop on G4. After king to B5, there is knight takes G4. And now let's see the finish here. Now, of course, black is up 2 pawns here, but maybe we can get one of them back. So let's see what happens. King H6, and then Hikaru chooses knight E3 instead, just to get a little bit closer and also keep the knight centralized, maybe just in case these pawns get a little bit active. So after knight E3, there's king takes A7, and then knight to C4. So he's defending, because of course if we take on H2, he's going to take on B6, and these passed pawns are very scary, even though we have our own on the other side of the board. Knight to C4 and knight to G5 from Karpov, attacking the E6 pawn, saying, hey, this is looking good. I might be able to really hold this. And then after knight to G5, there's bishop takes H2. And what do? There are passed pawns ready to be pushed here from Aaron Nimzowicz, as he says in my system. Passed pawns must be pushed. Bishop takes H2, knight takes E6, and passed pawns must be pushed, and H5, and we live, and he's going to run these boys down the board as quickly as possible, but we have pieces that can stop them, says Karpov. So bishop to B4, maybe going back to E1 just to try to stop or get back as quick as possible, also playing maybe A4 in some cases. Bishop B4, and there's H4, then B3, attacking the knight, and then here it is. He says, you know what? I don't think you can catch this. I don't think you can catch this pawn at all. So he says H3, take my knight if you like. And then here's what happens. Knight to G5 to hit the A6 pawn. And in this position, guys, the best defense is offense. And that's going to be my tip for you guys and my hint. The best defense is offense. So what are you going to do in this position? Hikaru Nakamura is playing black here. What do? Your pawn on H3 is hanging and your knight's hanging. So what would you do about this? Well, against the world champion, former world champion, Anatoly Karpov, he actually chose this move here, guys. Bishop B8, and we great. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's a check. That's a check. And after he takes H2, and what do? The game is over. B takes C4 and queen. Very, very mean here from Hikaru Nakamura. It was very beautiful. And that was number 1 of the top 5 King's Indian defenses from Hikaru Nakamura. Now, let's move on to number 2. And now we move on to number 2 of Hikaru Nakamura's King's Indian defenses, the top 5. Now in this game, it's Alexander Beliavsky versus Hikaru Nakamura in 2009. Now in this position, looks wild, right? Something you usually will see in the King's Indian defense. Now this one is what they call more of the Mar-del Plata system, where a lot of times it's just about who gets to who first. We're going to push all our kings here on, or all our pawns here on the king side. We're going to try to use the rook, bring the bishop back, and try to decisively make this king as fast and as quick as possible. And on the other side, white's actually doing everything that they can to tear open the queen side. And when that happens, it's a battle of who gets to who first. Knight b5 was the last move here, attacking the rook here. Now you would think you would just move your rook, right? Especially if you want to use this maybe to play rook f7, bishop f8, which is a very common theme, and then rook g7, and trying to use the rook as well with this king side attack. But unfortunately, it may be too slow. Now, what would you do in this position? Well, here it goes. Instead of moving the rook here, actually, Hikaru says, g3. I don't care. Take the rook. I dare you. So Beliavsky says, I'm going to take the rook. Knight takes c7. Show me what you got here. Now, after that, knight takes c7. You would think you just take on h2, right? It's probably the intention. Playing g3. Maybe take the knight after taking on h2. But watch this, guys. Now, is there a better move? Maybe, maybe not. I want you to try to figure that out. What do you think Hikaru played in this position? Here it is, guys. Instead of g takes h2, he actually did knight takes e4 for the score. Look at this. He sacrificed well, first off a rook, and now sacrificing a knight and saying, I'm going for it. You will get mated or something's going to happen here. Now, this looks absolutely bananas. Let's see what happens. He says knight e6 here. I'm up a rook, and I want to trade pieces when you're up material. The rule is trade when you're up, not when you're down. So after knight e6 here, I'm also blocking the bishop, because usually when you play h3, in these kind of positions, we're going to sacrifice the bishop and follow up with queen h4, shut the door, game's over. But a lot of times here, knight e6 is a great defensive move and allowing this bishop to be eliminated, actually. So bishop takes e6, d takes e6, and now black's like, cool, I'm up material. You don't really have an attack here. I probably can just chill over here on the king side. Now after d takes e6, there is g takes h2. And if king h1, it's going to actually transpose into exactly what happened here in the game, which was king takes h2, and then queen check and knight to g3. If actually king h1 here, it's the same thing. King takes and then check, reaching the same position. So he actually just chose to take here. Nakamura responds with queen to h4 and king to g3, king g1, and knight over to g3 here. So this is not mate. So you still have work to do, guys. You still have work to do. Sometimes you may find a nice combination, but you still got work to do. Now, I know there's a famous quote out there that says the hardest game to win is a game you're winning. You're a game that's already won. And that's true here. You should be winning. It's great. The king is like in a box here, but there's no mate yet. There's no mate yet. King f2 will be a fatal blunder, and that didn't happen. So we need to probably cover this diagonal as quickly as possible, and just in case, e4 and bishop d4 is definitely going to be some of the next moves. So bishop takes c5 and says, we live. Oh yeah, we got this. We have this diagonal. One lock here. You're not getting to me. And he says, well, e4 anyway. Now here's the thing. If pawn takes, you do have something like, at the very least, you can take your rook back and get some material, and that's the very least. And then knight takes as well. You may even have rook d8 in there in some cases. But this is mate. Oh my goodness, right? Let's just get that off the screen. This is a family channel. So now after e4 here, there's rook to a4, saying, hey, don't take my rook. I'm not going to allow that. I'm up material. We're also going to try to x-ray this queen from the other side of the board. And after rook a4, Hikaru stays active. In these type of positions, guys, a move like a6, king h7, king h8, these will all be fatal errors because you need to be fast, especially after you sacrifice material. You definitely need to be fast. So rook to c8, we're now hitting the bishop here, and it allows him to take this pawn here on a7, and he does. And he says, you know what? Hey, look, I got to keep my bishop on this diagonal. Now, guys, this is showing so much strength here from Hikaru Nakamura. There's a lot going on. Black to move. What would you actually do? Now, probably, a lot of you are probably thinking e3. So let's just see. Take a second. What would you play in this position? Black to play e3 is definitely a move, but it's not the best move. And it also runs into knight takes e3, which is like, ouch, right? Like, how did this even happen? Now you're like losing. So this doesn't look good. This doesn't look good. And here's a move that is so strong here, guys. I didn't even consider it. And after I saw it, I was like, this is wonderful. That's why Hikaru was half man, half everything else. Now, after bishop takes a7, there's b5. And we live. What a move here. This was so strong. So strong. Like b5, what does it do? It's forking. Oh, en passant, of course, especially for the beginners here watching. En passant is in passing, actually just in French. But what happens is I just passed the b6 square. So you could en passant this, which is great. Absolutely en passant. But then, oh my goodness. Bishop d4 check, flex real hard, get the man off the board here. Oh my goodness, what a move. What a move. Bishop d4, now blocking this. And then after queen takes, knight takes e2, mate, and a queen. Oh my, this is, I'm sorry, we got to get this off the screen. We just can't allow that. So that didn't happen. After b5, of course, after b5, same thing. Even with knight to b6 is actually not the same. You can't check. So we can play e3. And now you can't take this. And how are you stopping mate? Oh, you're not. Right. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back. After b5, strong move here. White is definitely shaken up after that move. And then after b5, there's rook to b4. Very, very strong. And Hikaru says, I have nothing better to do. We're going to take this knight. Now, at least we're doing a little bit better on material. A little bit better on material. And we have this decisive kingside attack that at a moment's notice, this is going to be over. Bishop takes c4, threatening stuff like e7 check. And Hikaru says, okay, it's time to go for it. We can't sit around. I've done everything that I can do. Now we're going to go queen h1 check, king f2, and then e3 check first. So the king is very, very short on spaces. If king e1, you have bishop c3 check, which is gross. So he actually takes, bishop takes e3, pawn takes, and you have two ways to take here. Oh, let's just take the knight. Well, knight, queen h4, mate, and we great. That's a game there. Beautiful. So, of course, after f takes e3, there's king takes e3. Knight takes f1 and bishop takes f1, and then queen to g1 here, sealing the deal. Now, Beliavsky resigned right here in this position. But, of course, why did he resign? Well, after king e2 or king e4, well, first off, your king is in the middle of the street here. Middle of the street, just not looking both ways. This is definitely going to be over very soon. And, of course, there's two ways, bishop h6 and rook c3, which can be done on both moves, king to e4 and king to e2, will both be met by rook to c3. And if you look at the material count, yeah, of course, this pawn's kind of scary, and like, you know, there's a lot of activity, but your king is actually unsafe. It's not as safe as my king over here, and there's not enough threats, and black is actually up a piece here. What a beast move and a beast game from Hikaru Nakamura. And that was number 2. Now let's move on to number 3. And here we are with number 3. This is Boris Gelfand versus Hikaru Nakamura in 2010. Now, here's the position here on the board. This is another Mar del Plata that we've seen here, or an orthodox modern system, normal variation. They'll name it here on Chess.com here. But with that being said, guys, this is more of a Mar del Plata. Again, the plans are very simple. We're going to attack on the king side as much as possible. Again, you see this rook on the 7th rank, like we did in number 2. And also, the white's going to be doing everything he can. As you see all these pieces over here, this looks kind of scary. Like, it's all about who gets to the king first. And this is usually the theme in opposite side castles. But in the King's Indian, it's like these same side castles. Whoever gets to the king first is going to win. And usually, white does it by means of actually destroying the queen side. And black does it by means of checkmating the king. This is why King's Indian is very fun. Now, after d6 here, d6 was the last move from Gelfand here. And Hikaru chooses a takes b6. Wild game here. There's a lot going with c takes, or d takes c7. But then there's queen takes d1, followed by the bishop hanging. So there's so much to do. Now, after a takes b6, actually, Gelfand chooses bishop to g1. He just says, hey, I'm going to go a little bit defense here. We're still kind of messing this up. And stuff's going to get kind of crazy. Well, you don't want to sit and do everything on the queen side, especially in these King's Indian type battles where white's on the queen side and black's on the king side. You still have to attack. So he says, hey, look, knight h4, we're going for it. Like, we have to do this now. Knight takes a knight h4, and after knight h4, there's rook to e1, which is definitely a strange move. Strange move here. It was not the best. You actually had h takes g3, which was one of the best moves, and the line looks like this: f takes g3, bishop e3, and bishop h3 being very strong, with the intention of pawn takes in g2 with the check, rook g1, and queen to c8. And then bishop f1. And this is the best defense, but black can still break through in some short lines. Very, very strange. But rook to e1 from Gelfand here. So after rook e1, guys, now you have a lot of moves to make. In this position, what would you play? After rook e1, Hikaru looks up and makes the faces that he usually does as he's calculating, and then he plays knight takes g2 and says, what do you do? Knight takes g2 is a big boy move from a big fella like himself. And after knight takes g2, there's d takes c7, saying, okay, hey, you know what? We got to get the queens off. Yeah, Nakamura is getting sharp. You don't want to be here. Let's just not let this happen. So in this position, again, guys, what would you do? Here it is. After d takes c7, I mean, probably trade queens, right? Or not. Knight takes e1 is on the board. Take my queen if you want to. Here, you know what? Get another queen. And then mate. Oh my goodness, with a pawn. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, nasty tactics here that you see all the time in the King's Indian defense. Now, instead, after he says, you know what, I'm not going to get mated like that. That's embarrassing. So queen takes e1, and then Hikaru does it anyway. G2 check. Just saying, hey, I'm going to activate my rook now. King takes g2, and then rook g7 check, which is an extremely strong move. And then king h1, your queen's hanging. You should move it, right? Or not. Bishop h3, there's mate. There's mate. Take my queen. You can have two queens if you like. And then after bishop h3, bishop f1. Okay, cool. We're going to defend the mate. Your tricks are over now, Hikaru. Please stop doing this. Yeah, I see the mate. It's obvious, says Gelfand. And after bishop f1, guys, black to move here. A lot of pieces hanging. h3 is hanging. The b6 pawn is hanging. Your queen is hanging. And he stops your mate. What do you do? Okay, when you find a good move you look for, better when we said that before, you got queen takes c7, queen c8, maybe, queen d7, right? Maybe, and actually these might run into some trouble, some issues here. But here's the move, guys. Queen d3. Oh my goodness. Let me wipe my sweat off of my face because I'm sweating after this move. Queen to d3. Wow, look at this. Beautiful. If you take my queen, well, then that's just mate and we great. Very simple. And then after bishop, okay, well, I'll take the bishop then. Same thing. Both ways. Oh my goodness. Beautiful chess here. So he plays queen d3, hammering down on mates everywhere. Can't take the queen. I mean, wow. This is absolutely swashbuckling, the greatest King's Indian type chess you will ever see. And after queen d3, there's knight takes e5, saying, okay, we got to go for something. We got to do something here. And then he takes on f1, again, leaving the queen hanging. I mean, the queen was hanging for how many moves, guys? Like, this is amazing. How many times can you leave your queen hanging and then voluntarily give it up and still keep it on the board and still be winning? That's just never happening. Now, after bishop takes f1, there's queen takes f1. And black says, instead of trading, don't really have any more moves. Rook takes g1 is a error, fatal blunder. So he takes on c3. And then we do a quick piece count. It looks like black's up. Let's see a few more moves. Rook c1 here, because there's a lot going on. This knight is actually in trouble as well too. But rook to c1 was played, and then queen takes e5. He says, okay, cool, I'm going to queen. You take my knight, and I take the rook here. And after queen e6, Gelfand resigned. He resigns right here. Wow, why did he resign? Well, let's check. Let's actually just see he's just up a piece. Now, of course, this is playable. You can and probably should still play on. But after what just happened, your brain is probably fried. He just hit you with so many tactics. Bishop h3, knight takes g2, sack my queen for 4 moves. And then, you know what? We're done. This game's over, right? I understand from Gelfand here. But with 4 pieces versus 3, you know, bad king structure, unsafe. There's just not enough here. And Hikaru is definitely going to finish this one out. And after queen e6, Gelfand resigns. Beautiful, beautiful chess here from Hikaru Nakamura in these King's Indian defenses. And now that was number 3, guys. So now let's move on to number 4. All right, guys. And here we are with number 4. This is Veselin Topalov versus Hikaru Nakamura in 2017. Now, the position here actually resulted from a King's Indian defense, the bayonet attack, which is actually one of the favorites from Kramnik here. And Veselin Topalov, being a former world champion, playing the bayonet attack is very strong here. Now, we reached this position with a lot of counterplay for black, being with the bishop here and stopping rook f1 from happening. Or you can do it, but we're going to take it. We also have an open F file. And queen c2 was the last move played from Topalov here, attacking the knight. So, of course, you do want to look for the best defense being offense. So you want to look for offensive moves. But if you can't find any, you're going to do like Hikaru did and just move the knight somewhere to still influence some of the squares around the king and where our pieces harmoniously are placed right now. So after knight to g5, there's c takes d6, saying, hey, take the pawn if you like. Go ahead, Topalov, because we need to get this attack going. And e4 did happen. Now we're threatening to take the rook here with the queen actually covering the dark squares, and there's no dark square bishop for white. So actually this is a real threat. We actually will take this rook. Usually this bishop is even stronger than a rook, but if there's no dark square bishop from your opponent, to take over the dark squares after you depart from this bishop here, or part with this bishop, what's going to happen is black's going to be just fine after taking this rook. So after e4, there's rook a to d1, and then queen to f6 here, threatening queen f2 and mate. This is very, very strong. How do you even stop this in a way? Knight f3 is looking great too as well. If bishop f1, knight f3, what happened, right? But all at the cost of sacrificing a pawn or two. Hikaru has a very good, strong position here. Well, rook f1 is like the only move. Ouch. I got to give up the exchange here. So after bishop takes, and like, whoa, wait a second here. We can just play knight f3 check, right? But instead, he actually chooses another move here, guys. And you want to always remember that the more pieces you have in an attack, the better that attack's going to be here. So we do have the queen, the rook, and the knight at 3, but we usually have like maybe 2 or 3 pieces kind of helping defend the king. So we need more. We need more ammo. Well, he says e3. Whoa, that's a strong move. Adding another piece into the attack here, allowing queen f2 to happen. Even knight f3, sometimes e2, and if knight takes e3, well, you're hanging your knight here. You don't want to do that. These knights are discoordinated when it comes to what's actually going on. Yeah, they're coordinated over here. We got a pawn, and it's about the queenside attack, but where is your queenside attack? In fact, black's just totally crushing in this position. And after e3, there's bishop to g2. And then knight to f3 from Hikaru says, hey, I'm up in exchange. Why not here? And he says, you know what? I'm not going to just do this. If I take like this game's just over. Like, why would I go for this, says Topalov. So he plays king h1 just to keep pieces on the board and see what happens. Hopefully we can survive here. Well, keep the threats up. You have to play very strong chess, and when you have the initiative, which is time and activity, you need to keep moving as much as possible and keep making threats. So knight to d4, attacking the queen here. Queen goes to the back rank, and you need to keep making threats. So this one's on you guys. Black to move. Here it is, actually. e2. Another one, e2, attacking the rook. Rook e1, and then kind of a threat in a way. It's strong. Actually, why not go into the position? Queen f2, it's a great square to put my queen on. Knight to e4 says, hey, you got to get out of here, Hikaru. You can't stick around here, man. Like, this is not that kind of party. And after knight e4, he plays queen f5. To now, we can even trade queens. Eventually here, we can also put pressure here with rook a to e8 at the right moment, because knight d6 is annoying. Then we have d6 from Topalov here, but that now takes away the knight square. They wanted to go to d6, so he plays rook a e8. Thanks for the free move, he says. And then knight e3, attacking the queen. But look at the knights, how they're trying to defend with all their might. The queen, the rook, and the knights are doing only one job, to defend the king, because we can't do anything else. And then queen to d7, so we back up a little bit here, h4 and king h8. We still got a game, says Topalov. We still got a game here. Now after king h8, there's queen to d3. Really not attacking anything. I don't know if we're going to take on e2. And now we're down both the rooks. Like, that's just, man, we need to have one at least, right? And here's the move, guys. Watch this cool move here. Now, black to move. What would you play in this position, guys? A lot of moves to make. What would you do? Here it is, actually. Hikaru says, it's King's Indian. You know, let's just take on e4 and think later. Rook takes e4, big boy move from a big fella. And if bishop takes e4, there's queen h3, and queen takes g3, lights out. Lights out. GG, start a new one. So queen takes e4, that's a very strong move, and you have to in a way. Like, of course, queen takes e4, and then after queen takes d6, so he sacrificed the exchange back, but now we have the queen hitting this, rook f1 is always looming. This is kind of annoying. We're only defending. The knight's extremely strong. Everything's wrong with white's position. After queen takes d2, there's a knight to c2, says, bro, please trade these knights. And he does it. He says, okay, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'll trade the knights just for you. But then I'm going to follow up with this move right here, which is queen takes g3. And that's a wrap there, guys. After queen takes g3, Topalov resigns here just due to everything losing. And why is this wrong, or why is he resigning here? After queen takes g3, the rook is hanging, h4 is hanging. Let's say you do queen takes c2 or rook takes. We'll look at both. If queen takes is obvious here, take with check. And you need more pieces for a successful attack. Usually it takes 3. There are exceptions, back rank mates, queen bishop, queen knight mates, queen rook mates by themselves. But with that being said, it takes multiple pieces. So here's the move, bishop d4 for the score, and start a new game there. And the same thing will happen after queen takes g3 and rook takes e2, taking king g1 and bishop d4 check. And another strong King's Indian defense from Hikaru Nakamura. That was number 4, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Now let's move on to the final one, number 5. And here we are, guys, with number 5. This is Fabiano Caruana versus Hikaru Nakamura in 2018. Now, this position here, this King's Indian, resulted from an early h3 line, which the intention usually there is to actually stop a lot of the kingside attacks that you would get in King's Indian defense in favor of doing it yourself with the white pieces, doing an early h3 and g4, maybe bishop e3s and queen d2s, and trying to actually mate black before black is able to do any kind of kingside play. Now, in these kind of variations, you actually go to the queen side of the board, as you see a lot of queenside play from black, which is not the usual in the King's Indian defenses. Now, here we do have this h3 variation, and it's black to move here. A lot of stuff going on, double rooks, kings are both looking kind of shaky here. And after bishop e2 being the last move, because b5 was played by Hikaru, so after bishop e2, there was king to f8, stepping out of the way. Now, after king f8 here, which is now attacking rook takes g5, and if rook takes, we can just take with our rook. And if there's a check on the back rank, we just step back up. g5 pawn is actually hanging. Black has exactly what we want here on the queen side, with decisive results if white's not careful. So king f1, Fabi says, step out of the way. Prophylaxis, and also in the way we just don't want him to take with check at all. So Hikaru says, okay, well, you're going to step out of the way. I'm still going to take the pawn. Now I have these pawns connected. g4 is going to be a very strong move. So Fabi responds with f3. Yikes, ugly looking move here. This bishop is trapped now in a way, like there's nothing you can really do. So in fact, Fabi's hoping for a blunder or even a draw here due to black's pieces just being better than white's pieces. And after f3, well, you have to keep the attack going, and we're going to play b4 before Fabi gets a chance to. So we're going to play b4 here, and after b4 there's knight to d1, stepping out of the way. Now you could play g4 here, maybe some other moves, maybe trying to reroute the queen, maybe trying to trade the light square bishop, but that probably wouldn't be good due to his bishops being bad. Now in this position, what would you actually play? What would you choose? Well, here's what Hikaru did. Hikaru says, this is easy. I do this. I do my tactics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Well, here it is. After knight to d1, knight takes b3. That's for me. That's a strong one right there. Thanks for the pawn. Appreciate it. Knight takes b3 with the intention of, if you take, well, I'm queening. Ouch. Nothing you can do about that. That's a tough one. So after knight takes b3, well, okay, queen c2 from Fabiano says, I'm not going to take that, but it kind of sucks because now I'm down a pawn. I don't have the king side attack I'm looking for. It's always going to be a trade, and you need multiple pieces for an attack. So if we trade this rook off and the queen and the rook are discoordinated, it's not going to work. Your pieces are too far away. Black's actually in a driver's seat. After queen c2, there's knight to d4. Again, always keep the attacks up as much as possible. The tempo, or tempi, plural actually, well, it's time. You get to buy yourself time. You get free moves in a way. So after knight d4, attacking the queen, queen has to move, allowing us to play b3. Past pawns must be pushed. I'm either going to take or play b2, and this is a wrap here. Your pieces are on the wrong side of the board. Nothing's going on. This bishop's terrible. The knight's on the back rank. We undeveloped our knight. So we developed it, and then we undeveloped it, and it sat here on d1 here. And then after b3, there's a takes b3 from Fabi. And what do you think happened, guys? Very simple here. a2 and do what we do, and that's a queen there, and that's very mean. This was awesome chess here. I hope you guys learned something today from the King's Indian defenses from Hikaru Nakamura, the top 5. I'm National Master James Canty III here with Chess.com, and I'll see you guys on the next video.